Hello, I'm Seth. This is Acquired Salary, the best living through career mastery. In today's short talk, I'm going to react to the Financial Times video on recruitment being broken and give my 2 cents. My goal here is to demonstrate and teach you how to think critically about business problems and apply this to your leadership and management so that you can get more done by maximizing leverage and therefore master your career. Before we get into it though, if you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. I would greatly appreciate if you would drop a like on the video and double check if you've subscribed yet. There's a 90% chance that you haven't, and I would greatly appreciate this type of support as it helps to grow Acquired Salary's reach so that I can continue to give you free tools, information, and perspectives you need to build the life you want. With that, let's get into it.
Businesses are fighting a skills shortage.
Over the next 20 years, our working age population is going to shrink by on average 25%.
Those lakes for talent will just keep getting smaller and smaller.
They're facing two massive shifts: a rapidly aging population with fewer young people entering the workforce, and the rise of generative AI. I'm going to look at the lengths employers are going to in order to secure the best candidates. If recruitment is broken, what are businesses doing to fix it? I'm Isabel Berwick.
I think from that standpoint, her intro here, it definitely gets to one of the root causes of what's broken recruitment in recent years, and that's AI. AI has flooded the market on both the employer side as well as the employee side or the candidate side, because AI is showing you which jobs to apply to. You're copying and pasting the job description into AI to refine your resume, and then AI is doing an initial filtering of your application before it even gets to the recruiter's eyes, and that has certainly changed the dynamic, as well as the ease with which we can apply to things has sort of broken the market at this point in time, especially as the economy's been in some difficult times as of late. But we'll continue with the video and see what more we can learn.
I host the FT's Working It podcast, and I write a newsletter about the workplace. In this series, I'll explore some of the most pressing issues around the future of work and talk to senior leaders about how they're making work better
How do you navigate the tensions that you come across as a leader?
for everyone. Recruiters are struggling. The numbers of applicants for almost every job have gone up sharply, and finding the best person for the role from thousands of applicants is a huge time commitment for hiring managers. AI-driven
Yeah, so from that standpoint, it's not necessarily, well, depending on the size of the company, it's on the hiring manager or the recruiter. Recruiters often have multiple requisitions, and if each requisition that they have has hundreds, if not 1,000 applicants, then they really don't have any time to any in order to get through all the applicants and make sure that they're filling their roles and getting their time to fill metrics met. They really have to just briefly glimpse through resumes right away. And so this iterates the importance of applying early and often. So checking the job market on a daily basis, or specifically at the beginning of the week when recruiters are posting new jobs, and applying super early increases the likelihood that you're going to be seen and actually reviewed before the recruiter gets through enough candidates to select who's going to interview. Because once you get the candidates selected for interview, the likelihood that a business is going to move forward with the qualified candidate and end up hiring them is pretty high, depending on how picky the hiring manager is. So from that standpoint, this just demonstrates the importance of applying early.
recruitment is creating an arms race on both sides. Are we in danger of losing the human from human capital?
This is the conundrum, isn't it? That you have 100, 1,000 applications for each job, and yet they can't recruit, and there are gaps. Partly driven by technology in general makes it very easy to apply. So I think you have more applicants, but the talent that you want is still as thinly spread as ever. Take the legal industry at the moment. We've seen the arrival of American law firms, and they are battling over those people. So they're battling with money. People who come out of their training contracts being offered salaries we've heard of 150, 180,000 pounds a year, whereas the UK firms were probably still pretty good at 60 to 80,000 originally.
The much publicised
So the online job application route is highly inefficient, again, because oftentimes recruiters are getting so many applications depending on how much friction or hurdles they add to the job application. Therefore, they have to sort through all kinds of candidates, and a lot of the candidates end up not being very well qualified. So from that standpoint, when recruiters are often opting to do active recruitment despite having posted a job, and the actively recruited candidates are more likely to get into an interview and get a job. And this is all because the recruiter knows the role and can specifically target people that fit that role well. increasing the likelihood that they're going to interview well and get hired, which in turn helps them to meet their time to fill metrics.
Sized high salaries for young lawyers are an outlier, but law isn't the only sector where businesses have to fight for the top candidates. There are talent shortages across many industries, especially as many older, skilled and highly qualified staff leave the workforce. Unretirement is one of the biggest trends in recruitment right now. So I went to meet Lindsay Simpson, founder and CEO of the 55 Redefined Group, which works with big companies, helping them to attract and keep talented people in their 50s and beyond.
There are three key problems associated.
Keeping talented people that are 50 or 55 and beyond is important because you hear employers talk about there's a skills gap. Well, if the older employees are more skilled and you are able to retain them, that's great. It solves the problem in the immediate term. But if you're thinking about it on a long-term perspective, you need to make sure that you're enabling those more skilled older employees to train the younger, less skilled employees. Otherwise, you're simply delaying the inevitable, because at a certain point, these older employees are going to retire. And if you have not closed the gap on the skills gap, you're just going to run into the same problem, which, as she gets into it here, it's going to continue to get worse because declining populations in the West.
With recruitment and an ageing population. The very first one is that people aren't having enough sex. Or if they are having sex, they're not having babies as the end result of that. And so we now find ourselves in most Western economies with the lowest birth rates on record, which means that over the next 20 years, our working age population is going to shrink by on average 25%. So 16 to 16-year-olds shrink. Whereas the over 60s population grows at over 40% in that same time zone. So if we continue to recruit youth and early talent, then that pool's getting 1-2% shrinker every year.
What role are over 50s going to be playing in workforces?
It's a real big shift in the next 5 years. So between now and 2030, 50% of the workforce will be aged 50 or over.
50%?
50% by 2030 in the UK. And over that in parts of Asia and other territories, and just shy of that in the US. That's staggering.
So are people you work with more concerned with kind of leveraging skills of their existing workforce and, perhaps making the most of people who are over 50? Or are they interested in plugging those talent gaps by recruiting older people?
I would say 95% was solving a very clear business problem. So if your infrastructure or your utilities or you have mainframe engineers, all sorts of sectors are reliant on skills, actuaries, where there is nobody under the age of 50, for at least a good 20 years coming through. And so the challenge is now to extend people's careers by 10, 20 years and find new and intriguing ways to work with people so that they can prolong their career.
Lindsay Simpson.
Again, from that standpoint, some employees that are highly skilled and say at 55, you can extend that career out at 10 to 20 years. But at the same time, if you have a 20-year gap and you can only extend that person's career for another 10 years, then you're going to have a skills gap for 10 years, which is why it's so important to provide those training and growth opportunities for the younger employees. In my last video, I talked about and reacted to some content on men giving up and dropping out of the workforce, specifically prime age working men. And I think a part of this is because we are seeing re-engagement of the older workforce, and that older workforce is often going to sit in more senior positions, which are going to have the higher salary and better benefits and such. So in order to re-engage young men, prime age working men, you need to create those opportunities. And the way you do that is by ensuring that you're training them and actively investing in their growth and development, because that is going to be a key piece to helping re-engage men into the workforce, or just people in general, because a lot of people at this point in time seem to just check out and they don't want to work because they don't see any growth opportunities. They're like, what's the point? I'm going to be stuck in this job that can barely make any ends meet for the next 20 years because there's no growth opportunities. So it's a fine line, and it's a dichotomy that you have to play as a business owner or as a manager. You have to figure out what is the right balance of keeping the more senior employees while also ensuring that they're granting new opportunities to the younger employees.
And other recruitment specialists have tapped into a powerful pool of talent that's been overlooked. And she highlighted the issues that industries like accountancy are facing with growing and retaining the talent necessary to do the job. Many employers have yet to utilise the over 50s recruitment market. Why? They can see the market is awash in people applying for jobs.
Employers and recruiters I've spoke to are frankly overwhelmed by the sheer number of CVs coming through. There's this sea of sameness where recruiters are seeing the same phrases coming up in job applications and in CVs. Job seekers are using AI at all stages of the process, from the moment that they find a job that they want to apply for, sometimes shown to them by AI on a platform like LinkedIn or Indeed. Then they get that job.
So again, she's speaking to the point that recruiters, they have multiple requisitions. All of these requisitions are getting hundreds, if not thousands of applicants, and they have to get through all of those resumes. But at the same time, all of these resumes are using the same tool to refine it. And so there's not really any key differentiator. So that's why it's important to make sure that if you do use AI in trying to refine your job application, that you still have something that sets you apart. One of the things that I find is most successful is leveraging network connections. If you apply to a job and you have some refinement through AI, that's good, but it's not going to set you apart unless, of course, you have an internal referral. So again, this is where networking comes into play, but I'm going to let her continue to explain what's going on with AI and job applications.
Job description, and they can paste it into a chatbot like ChatGPT. They can ask it to write an application for them, write a cover letter, improve their CV, and then they just copy and paste it back in. Employers and recruiters, they're saying they're not actually seeing many good candidates using AI.
Some of them are saying, because of AI, we're not going to do cover letters and CVs anymore. We're going to do something else because we just can't trust them. Others are saying, if you use AI, we will immediately throw it out. And over at the other end of the spectrum are, if you like, we talk to games companies who say, yeah, of course we use AI because we use it at work.
A wide selection of applicants to look at is great for an employer. What isn't so great is that AI tools have lowered the...
A wide selection of qualified applicants is great for the employer. At this point in time, based on how easy it is to apply to jobs and how fast it is to apply to jobs, even with customizing your resume, it's not always going to be the case that you have a wide pool of talented and qualified applicants.
the barriers to application. It's now much less effort than it used to be. A recent poll found 45% of applicants had used generative AI to build or improve their CVs. Finding the right talented people can sometimes seem like a hopeless task for overwhelmed hiring managers.
Again, this is why recruiters are going to more so rely on actively recruiting employees via LinkedIn. And that kind of gets into the point of why it's important to have a updated and optimized LinkedIn profile that targets the type of jobs that you want.
International electronics company Siemens has found an innovative alternative route to identify the candidates best matched to their vacancies.
I think my business is a really nice microcosm of everything that is challenging out there around skills for the future. We still need great people to come in and safely use spanners and screwdrivers to fix grey boxes. But then we're also moving into an era where those grey boxes will connect and we will create digital solutions from the data that those grey boxes provide, plus a layer on top of that around keeping that safe through cybersecurity. So we've got an incredible period of workforce transformation. We almost have this absolute perfect storm, hence why those lakes for talent will just keep getting smaller and smaller. Often the quality of the candidates were less than we've been used to in the past. We were also going through a process where we get people right through to the end of the hiring process and they would receive a better offer from someone else. So it's just becoming more and more difficult.
Yeah, that's where it becomes important. If you are trying to hire for a role, you really need to prioritize that role because it is still an open market, and the slower you move, the higher the likelihood is that that candidate is going to get an offer from another position, which is not good news, especially when you consider the fact that hiring is so expensive. Anywhere from entry-level employees cost 30 to 100% of their annual salary to recruit. Mid-level employees, anywhere from 100 to 150. I've even seen 200% of their annual salary just to recruit them. And then the senior level employees are anywhere from 200 to 400%, all depending on the data and the sources that you're using. But from that standpoint, that point clearly demonstrates recruiting and hiring is expensive. So you want to make sure, one, that you're doing a good job with it, and two, that you're moving fast, because the last thing you want to do is spend that much on recruiting a senior level employee and then they get an offer somewhere else. So it's important to move with speed. Speed is king.
Industry where people's experiences is highly valued and certainly not rejected. That CV holds a lot of kudos. We decided, look, we need to do something a little bit different.
By teaming up with a recruitment company called Arctic Shores, which uses AI-powered and task-based psychometric assessments, Siemens is now recruiting for some roles on aptitude rather than qualifications and specific experience.
What's been fun?
Aptitude testing is great, and I think this is something that is going to be more widely adopted over the course of the next couple of years, especially since the advent of AI. And this is all, it boils down, my hiring philosophy in general has been to hire people that are generally intelligent. They have good big five personality traits, so they're conscientious, they're going to do good work, they're going to show up on time, and that sort of thing, as well as from that standpoint, embracing the growth mindset. I think those, if you're especially on lower level employees, you don't need a filter for highly specific skills, especially if you invest time and energy and effort into a good onboarding process and good training materials, as well as growth and development opportunities. That's an easy way to solve for the entry level. But as you get into the more senior level, you need to see some of that past experience, of course, but it can be transferable skills. Transferable skills being something that is, in general, like breaking it down to the fundamental, like fundamentally, what is a skill? Is it communication? Well, if they've demonstrated they have the ability to communicate well in previous roles, sure, they might not have the specific job title, but that does not necessarily disqualify them from a role that communication plays an important role in.
Fantastic is that we've expanded our pool of talent, and that's pool of talent outside of the typical industry. We've got a very clear set of behaviours that work in our organisation, and I can now find people that's behaviours match that to complement what we're trying to do. But I'm also encouraged by when someone's been with us 2 years, they've passed through and they're moving on to a different role, either in Siemens and sometimes outside. I think that's how the workforce is moving towards, that kind of, that job for life. However, kind of romantic that sounds, I'm not sure it's there. And with future generations, the same. But if you get the behaviours right, then there's a far more likely they will progress within the organisation because their fit and the value that they're adding and we're giving them, it's symbiotic through the journey.
We just don't have enough people with the skills. So it's how do you assess somebody for those transferable skills and capabilities that means that they could be really, really good for some of these roles that we're struggling to fill. And we just need to look at the talent pool in a different way.
Again, identifying the skills comes down to boiling it down to the fundamentals. A niche technical application, for the most part, niche technical skills are tracking to a Pareto distribution or the rule of 80-20. So, the first 20 hours of learning the new niche application of a fundamental skill gets you 80% of the way there to being an expert in the area. So from that standpoint, I think it's good to consider that when recruiting and hiring.
Combining neuroscience and psychology principles, Arctic Shores has created a number of tasks that score candidates based on how they think and learn. The company believes that AI, used in this way, can predict how an individual will succeed in a particular job. I invited its co-founder and CEO, Robert Nuri, to the FT's offices to see it for myself. Candidates have to complete a number of interactive, non-job-related tasks and are scored on how they approach them.
So your task here is to trial a new security system. And the idea around that is we want to see how you approach it, and as things get harder, how you adapt to your behaviour. Good, you're on the second one. This was the one where... you just got it.
Oh, I did?
You did. You're now to the third one, so it's getting hard.
Okay. No.
So what did I pick up from the way that you approach this? You're somebody that grasps something quickly, and once you've grasped it, you want to get stuck straight into it.
So you'll be able to spot the people who are incredibly impatient.
Some tasks you want people to be really, really focused and to take time to do it. Other things they have to think really fast on their feet. Traders, sales roles. So you actually want them to be slightly impatient. So that's the beauty of this.
So Robert, what's the difference between me doing this and how that applies to a recruiter or a particular job and me sending in my CV?
This is at the crux of the challenge that we've got at the moment.
So from that standpoint, the test that they just demonstrated is... essentially, it's going to be a big 5 personality trait variation. Perhaps they're adding, the more dynamic, not just a questionnaire aspect to it to make it more engaging, because again, it's like sales and marketing from business to consumer. Well, if you want more qualified consumers, you're going to add friction to the process of buying, like more hoops and loops that the consumer is going to have to jump through before they can buy your product. Well, what that effectively does, it reduces the number of leads that you're going to obtain, but at the same time, those leads are going to be more qualified. Applying that to recruiting, it doesn't work out quite the same because the highly competent employees are going to be in more demand. So other companies are going to compete and say, oh, well, we can see that you're competent. We don't need you to jump through all these hoops and loops for you to turn in a job application and actually be considered for the role. So it's a fine line, but if something like this, I think a Big 5 personality assessment was widely adopted in general by Fortune 500 companies, then that's something that would be, generalized, and it would be something that you just need to have, similar to a resume. Like if you have this Big 5 personality trait assessment, you can take that and include it in your job application, and then the company can put it on themselves to do an analysis of the people that are most successful in their existing roles and do that comparison without needing to necessarily dress it all up with AI. I think the the simpler and less expensive it is, the more likely it is to become more widely adopted. But from that standpoint, it's important to consider personality traits when hiring.
In the recruitment process. Because in a CV, as we have here, you're just going to be looking through a bunch of words, very subjective, full of bias and flaws.
Talk me through what they're telling us and what they're not telling us. This looks like a LinkedIn profile.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you either got the experience in here or you haven't, and that's what a recruiter is looking for. And quite often, people are just putting keywords in there because they know that
SEO, data analytics. You can just throw
those words in.
Okay.
Nobody's got a way of validating against. So then what happens? This was a story that
nobody has a way of validating against a resume that has keywords thrown into it. But that's something that you do in the interview process. You ask questions and you see what kind of technical knowledge and expertise they can demonstrate with those skills by asking technical interview questions. But from that standpoint, that can become a time waster, especially if you get into an interview and you realize, oh, this candidate just threw in the keywords and we interviewed them because they had what seemed like a great resume, but as you actually have a discussion with the candidate, they don't demonstrate competence in those skills. So again, it's important to have those keywords in your resume if you are applying to jobs online. But again, more so important to have those keywords on your LinkedIn profile so that you can get into those recruiter phone screens, and being able to demonstrate your technical competence in those recruiter phone screens is important because that's going to move you to the next stage of interviewing. And what he's going to show here is going to be very interesting. It kind of demonstrates that AI in general, it has some biases in terms of big name companies. Is that a shocker? If you have worked at a big name company, you can kind of probably speak to your own experience of, oh yeah, the big name company increases my competitiveness in the job market.
was went on Reddit and LinkedIn, Angelina Lee, she got no interviews based on her standard CV. So she amended it just to put big brand names in there. But what else do you notice, Isabel, from her CV in there?
Spread herpes STD to 60% of intern team. Connected with Reid Hoffman on LinkedIn and slid in the DMs.
So the DMs, you'd have thought that would just be a red flag in there.
And she's quite impressive. Fraternity record for most vodka shots in one night.
So how many interviews do you think she would have got by putting that in there compared to her normal CV?
I'm hoping none.
She got a 10 times increase. She got a 90% acceptance rate for interview, despite having that in there compared to a genuine CV because she hadn't any of that big company experience.
Wow.
So employers, recruiters...
Again, this demonstrates that having a big name company on your resume is important. So if you're trying to develop your career and you get the opportunity, even if it is potentially a lower salary, having that on your resume is going to increase the likelihood. And again, same thing with job titles, because often a lot of hiring managers and recruiters, they just look to see, oh, do you have this specific job title in your past experiences? Well, this is why if you've ever worked with a temporary contract agency, you'll give them your resume and then they take that resume and they alter it to include those keywords, to change job titles that are relevant to the role. And it's these sort of small little changes that can get you past the recruiter. But of course, this is because recruiters are only taking a couple of seconds to briefly look through your resume and determine if they're going to give you a call back.
And online job sites, they all use AI and have been using AI for some time. The way that employers and recruiters are using AI is to sift through applications. So that might be setting a specific thing that they want to filter out. So if you've been to university, they'll include you. If you haven't, they won't, and they can detect that on a CV in the text. This has been shown to be quite effective, but perhaps it's not the best way of telling who the best candidate is. AI.
To her point, it is effective because, in general, getting a bachelor's degree is going to indicate that you have a general intelligence higher than, or an IQ higher than 100, probably closer to 115. And then from that standpoint, it pushes it's right on the line of appealing to credentialism, like a logical fallacy, because yes, it's true. You can have a bachelor's degree and be more intelligent than the general population, but also the specific kind of bachelor's degree matters because there is data around which degrees require the highest level of IQ in order to successfully obtain the degree. Of course, all of this said and done does not mean that if you don't have a bachelor's degree, you don't have a higher IQ, because you can have a higher IQ and not get a bachelor's degree. Like, that's an individual decision. So again, it is not perfect, but it works. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it is often what you see in the recruitment space.
It's trained on the data that we have in the world, and a lot of the data that we have is biased. It perpetuates inequalities in society that we already have, and that's something that can catch employers off guard as well, because they are setting certain metrics based on the job, but they might not anticipate how the algorithm will work, and the algorithm might prefer certain types of candidates over another.
We ask employers every year, so what are you doing to assess applicants? And even today, CV cover letter comes out at like 90+%. Employers are generally risk averse because it's a big bet when you recruit somebody. You've spent a lot of time in the process of recruiting, then you're going to put a lot of, well, maybe cash, maybe just time into training, and you have plans that they're going to be here, well, 4, 5, maybe more years. So
the assumption that an employee is going to stay at a company for 5 or more years is a bad assumption, especially if your company does not include training, growth, and development opportunities. Depending on the statistics that you're looking at, from what I recall, is companies that don't have great training and growth and development opportunities see an average tenure of employees at 3.2 years. As if you add training, growth, and development opportunities, that tenure goes up to 5.4 years. And of course, you can play with certain incentives. Like I know with my past experience with Medtronic, they have whatever 401k matching, but the vesting period is essentially 3 years. So that helps incentivize you to stay for at least 3 years. So there's certain levers that you can pull in order to incentivize employees to stay, but for the most part, it kind of boils down to growth and development opportunities, because that's what people care about. People want to continue to grow in their career so that they can not just make ends meet, but start to live a better and better lifestyle. And all of this considered, yes, employers are still going to be risk averse because, especially in today's economy, the senior leaders are expecting managers to do more with less and really be frugal. So if you have to do more with less, that means you have less recruitment budget, less training budget, less, just capital in general to do things with, which kind of silos us down into hiring managers and recruiters looking for very niche and specific skill sets, even though I've covered earlier in this video that it doesn't necessarily need to be that case. It's a dichotomy. Do you want to hire somebody that doesn't have the niche skill set but has the transferable skills and spend a little bit of time training them? Or do you just want to hire somebody and have them hit the ground running? Well, if you're looking to hire somebody and have them hit the ground running, then you're probably going to extend the time it takes to fill for that role, which all boils down to the specific problems you're trying to solve and the timelines you have associated with that. And I think at this point, it's very clear that employers are choosing to take longer to find the unicorn candidate versus hiring and training. Of course, when they complain about skills gaps, this is just perpetuating the problem. But let's continue.
it's a big investment. I'm not sure businesses are trying harder to get the best talent. I think they were trying equally hard, but limiting themselves to, let's be honest here, that these are the sort of people we know. We should look at everyone and then assess people on, well, can you do the job? Have you got the attitude that we want? I think they're being pushed into it by the younger generation and diversity and EDI quite right, but they're also realizing this is a good thing to do, because actually, if you have diverse or a wide range of voices in the room, you actually get better results.
I expect in another 3 to 5 years, we will see a lot of companies utilize artificial intelligence to make sure that they can attract and retain the best talent.
I went to visit Swiss pharmaceutical company Novartis on its giant campus in Basel to see how it is approaching the recruitment crisis. Like many businesses, Novartis incorporates AI in its hiring processes. What makes it stand out is that corporate leaders have invested in AI that will boost the number of internal moves by its existing workforce.
I think the biggest challenges that we face is a real shortage of talent with specific skill sets. And so we really thought a lot about it, and we really came to the conclusion we need to do even more for the people who we have so that we can really develop and retain them.
Novartis has created a platform called Talent Match that pairs its staff to other opportunities around the organisation based on their skills and interests. So I know a lot of companies are starting to think a lot more structurally about internal mobility. You're a bit ahead of the game. What are the benefits of it? And can you quantify how much money you're saving on external recruitment?
One key benefit for us is enhanced engagement of our employees. We know that when people have access to opportunities, they're more engaged. And we staff more than 500 projects through our employees, and it helped us to realize more than 15 million productivity. That's a lot of money that we can then reinvest back into research and development. As we see that things are changing really quickly in how we operate, we can also post opportunities in new parts of the organization and reallocate people way more quickly.
What I liked about this approach at Novartis is that it gives staff the chance to review their skills. Based on what an individual says about their ambitions, the AI will tell them what training and skills they still need to acquire before they are a match for their dream job. What's key is that this kind of approach is scalable, replicable, and will only get easier as AI gets better at its job.
Look at Novartis here. If you really wanted to game this system, you could put those key skills into your profile, especially if it aligns with your interests, and increase the likelihood that you're going to get considered for some of those internal promotion opportunities. But overall, I think as these systems get refined, it'll become more widely adopted, and we'll start to see companies return to the day where they would actually invest in training and developing their employees, because they're going to realize it's cheaper. Again, because I talked about the cost of recruitment, it is very expensive depending on what data you're looking at. It's almost prohibitively expensive for especially smaller companies.
If applying for jobs has got even lower, the trick is going to be finding something that welcomes the widest group of applicants that you want, but is enough to say, do you really meet these criteria? Do you really think you can do this? The criteria being about these attitudes that you're going to demonstrate when you get here.
Again, from that standpoint, it's about that funnel. How much friction do you want to add to the funnel in order to have pre-qualified candidates? Oftentimes what we see in current job applications, there's not a lot of friction, so there's a lot of unqualified applicants. But the more friction you add, the more qualified candidates you get, but you might be robbing yourself of top-tier talent.
Recruitment industry is going through a process at the moment where they're learning how to use AI from the employer side as well to their advantage, and perhaps save time, perhaps make things easier. And another thing I think it's been doing in the recruitment sector is really making employers and recruiters pause and think, is a CV or an application necessarily the best way to determine who is good for the job? Are there other metrics we could be using?
The tech we use at work is changing so quickly that bosses and staff can't keep up. But some employers can and are doing better at using AI to find new hires with the right skills, or to deploy training that will upskill existing staff. We need more of that in future if recruiters are to find and hire the right talent. But humans don't change, and we also need to keep the human touch if we are to fix the crisis in our recruitment pipelines. AI can't do it all.
Exactly. AI can't do it all, and I think from that standpoint, making sure that recruiters can find qualified candidates also means that you need to make sure that hiring managers understand the process as well. Once a company is large enough, there's that recruitment role, and then there's the hiring manager role, and you need to make sure that these roles are aligned so that they're going through the same process. And once you standardize the process, you can make the refinements that you need to improve the process and ensure you're continuing to get highly qualified candidates. With all that said, the system is currently broken, and it will likely improve in the future. But how do we address these problems today as an individual? Well, from that standpoint, it's important to network and build relationships, specifically with recruiters and hiring managers, because they're the ones that are making those key decisions. And if you have a relationship with them, you can come to mind and be recruited for roles that you wouldn't have had the opportunity otherwise. Same thing goes with in your current workplace. You need to make sure that you're building a positive reputation, because the people that you build a positive reputation with may end up moving roles and becoming a hiring manager, or being able to give you an internal referral, which increases the likelihood that you're going to get interviewed. So this in turn opens new doors and opportunities for yourself. Finally, the optimizing your LinkedIn profile. That's so incredibly important, because that's where recruiters are actively recruiting. If you have an optimized LinkedIn profile, they're going to be more likely to actively recruit you. And then finally, if you are in an active job search, it's important to be resilient. Job market today is tough, but we're starting to see signs that it is turning around. So don't give up. You might be on the breakthrough, or right on the cusp of a breakthrough. Overall, what do you think? Please share your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. And if you've made it this far into the video, please like the episode. And you may as well consider joining the Acquired Salary School community.